Good morning, this is your daily briefing from the New York Times. Today's headlines for Monday, July 27, 2026. We've got a packed edition today, from a Supreme Court ruling that could reshape the American workforce, to a president confronting the limits of his power in the Middle East, to wildfires threatening one of France's great cities, and a generational uprising in India that's reached the streets of Manhattan. Let's dive in. We begin with the top story. A recent Supreme Court ruling has cleared the way for the Trump administration to end a humanitarian program that has allowed about 1 million immigrants to work legally in the United States. The program, known as Temporary Protected Status or TPS, has been a lifeline for workers from countries including El Salvador, Haiti, Venezuela, and others deemed too dangerous for return. Now, employers across the country are bracing for what could be a sudden, massive labor shortage. Around Washington, Salvadoran-born crews have helped renovate, rebuild, and maintain the Capitol, the Pentagon, and Arlington National Cemetery. In senior living facilities in Florida, Massachusetts, and New York, Haitian caregivers assist aging Americans with daily activities. These workers are among more than 1 million people who have been allowed to live and work in the U.S. under protections that the administration has long sought to dismantle. The court's decision removes a key legal barrier, and the ripple effects could be felt in construction, healthcare, agriculture, and hospitality sectors already struggling to fill positions. Miriam Jordan and Madeline No, who cover immigration and its economic impact for The Times, report that business groups are sounding the alarm, warning that removing these workers en masse would deal a severe blow to an economy that has come to rely on them. That ruling arrives at a moment when the president himself is grappling with constraints he didn't anticipate. David Sanger, who has covered 5 U.S. presidents over more than 4 decades and spent more than 20 years reporting on efforts to contain Iran's nuclear program, writes in a news analysis that President Trump, a leader who often celebrates his unpredictability, declaring it keeps allies and adversaries alike off balance, has discovered several limits to his power, leaving him more frustrated and erratic. By his telling, his willingness to bomb Iranian nuclear sites 13 months ago, and to send Delta Force commandos in to snatch President Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela from his bed in early January, reflected his determination to execute military operations that would have made his predecessors blanch. But the war with Iran has not gone as planned. The ceasefire that began unraveling on July 7 has pulled the U.S. deeper into a conflict that the president once suggested would be swift and decisive. Now, he finds himself, in Sanger's words, wielding the world's biggest hammer but trapped by a war that refuses to end on his terms. And in a story that continues to pull back the curtain on one of the most notorious figures in recent American history, we're learning more about the woman who stands to inherit much of Jeffrey Epstein's fortune. Karina Shuliak, 37, is described as a complicated and unusual figure in the disgraced financier's world who has been trying to blend into obscurity since his death. The details of her relationship with Epstein and the mechanics of the inheritance remain shrouded in the kind of secrecy that has long characterized the Epstein saga, but her emergence as a primary beneficiary adds another layer to a story that has already implicated princes, presidents, and titans of finance. Turning to world news, and a remarkable story out of India. Abhijit Dip founded the Cockroach Janta Party as a joke after a judge insulted young people during a court proceeding. The name was meant to be absurd. Cockroaches, after all, survive everything. But the idea snowballed into a generational movement that has genuinely challenged the country's leaders. What began as satire became a vehicle for real grievances: unemployment, corruption, a sense that the political class has failed an entire generation. The movement rocked the Indian government and led to the resignation of its education minister. And remarkably, it's gone global. In Manhattan, hundreds of Indians abroad gathered in front of a statue of Mahatma Gandhi in Union Square, chanting "We will take our freedom" in Hindi. Arsh Chauhan, a 25-year-old finance student at Baruch College who describes himself as apolitical, said he joined after watching videos of police in India beating protesters. "There's a limit to everything," he said. 2 protests were held in the park last week, drawing an estimated 500 people. It's a striking example of how a movement born from a joke can become a serious force, and how the Indian diaspora is watching, and acting, from afar. In southwestern France, a fierce, fast-moving and capricious wildfire has spread to within 10 miles of Bordeaux, the country's 6th largest city. Mark Landler and Julia Imbert, reporting from Bordeaux, describe a city that has become a refuge for thousands evacuated from surrounding towns and villages. Many have taken shelter in Bordeaux's cavernous exhibition center, united by fear, confusion, and a determination to get back to homes they desperately hope will be spared. There are differing voices in this instant community, attesting to the divergent lives of the people who fled: retirees, families with young children, farmers who left livestock behind. The fire is still spreading rapidly, and with several thousand sheltering in the city, the mood is a fragile balance of dread and hope. And in Berlin, an overnight manhunt for the attacker who killed a woman and injured 29 others at a gay pride celebration stretched through Sunday afternoon. Jim Tankersley, reporting from Berlin, writes that government officials sought the public's help in apprehending the man responsible for what they called an Islamist terrorist attack. The suspect, a 21-year-old man, was ultimately killed in a police shootout as the large-scale manhunt reached its climax. Chancellor Friedrich Merz of Germany said on Sunday before entering a memorial service at St. Mary's Church, "These criminals, these extremists, have no place in the middle of our society. And we will not allow this poison of terrorism and this poison against our freedom to spread." The confrontation occurred as the city was still reeling from the violence at a celebration meant to embody inclusion and joy. Back in the United States, a chaotic shooting at a food festival in Seattle's downtown arts and entertainment venue left 3 people dead and 4 others wounded, including a toddler. Yen Zhuang and Ishani Desai report that at least 2 people sprayed gunfire during the festival in the shadow of the Space Needle. Officers took 1 suspect into custody, Assistant Chief Tyrone Davis of the Seattle Police Department said at a news conference late Sunday, and they were searching for another described as a young person. Investigators believed the 2 suspects had been shooting at each other. One witness said, "I'd never felt so scared in my life." The violence erupted in a space meant for community and celebration, near one of the city's most iconic landmarks. In Texas, a wrenching legal and moral struggle is unfolding over a 2-year-old girl named Annalise Camp. Pooja Silhotra reports that Annalise was found unconscious in a swimming pool on Memorial Day. It wasn't clear how long she had been underwater. Paramedics performed CPR and a faint heartbeat returned, but not enough to stimulate a pulse in her wrist. She was put on a ventilator at a Houston area hospital, and doctors overseeing her care thought she was brain dead. But her family believed she could recover, and the camp's resistance to a test to confirm the brain death diagnosis reflects the newest front in a continuing struggle over where the line between life and death is drawn and who gets to draw it. Opposition to the test has been gaining support from anti-abortion activists, who see in this case a broader battle over the definition of death itself and the rights of families versus medical institutions. And in California, a 44-year-old man was convicted Friday of pushing his flaming car into a gully after it had gotten stuck, setting off one of the state's largest ever wildfires. Nicholas Bogel-Burrows reports that Judge Kristen Lucina determined after a 3-day trial that Ronnie Stout was guilty of arson for igniting the park fire in July 2024, which burned across 429,603 acres in Northern California, about the size of the city of Houston, and destroyed hundreds of homes and other structures. No one was killed in the blaze, which was the largest ever to be set intentionally in California and the 4th largest wildfire of any cause. Stout faces a prison sentence of 25 years to life. The case stands as a stark reminder of how a single act of recklessness can unleash destruction on a staggering scale. Shifting to politics, and a portrait of a party in crisis. Shane Goldmacher and Reed J. Epstein, who interviewed more than 24 Democrats including current and former Democratic National Committee officials, paint a picture of Democratic Party headquarters where every week brings paranoia, worries about money, and, on occasion, emotional eruptions, including, they report, phone-throwing drama. The Democrats should be well positioned to make gains in this year's midterms. But inside the building, the financial picture is dire. Leaders have undertaken a new gambit to mask the severity of the problems, asking vendors not to send bills until after the midterm elections. The bookkeeping maneuver, described by 3 people briefed on it, is the latest sign of financial duress for an organization that is supposed to be the engine of the party's electoral ambitions. The disarray raises questions about whether the party can capitalize on what many see as a favorable political environment. At the Pentagon, facing criticism that it had minimized the number of U.S. soldiers killed and wounded in the war with Iran, the Defense Department on Sunday changed the way it reports casualties. Helene Cooper, reporting from Washington, explains that casualties since July 7, when the ceasefire began unraveling and fighting escalated, are no longer listed on a Pentagon website with others since the war began. Instead, they appear on a new web page labeled generically as Overseas Operations Casualties. This means that a full accounting of the overall casualty toll now requires toggling between 2 separate web pages, potentially making it more difficult to tally the war's full toll. The change came as the Pentagon announced a higher number of wounded service members this month, an acknowledgement, perhaps, that the conflict is exacting a heavier price than previously disclosed. And the politics driving the Pentagon's leadership come into sharper focus with the rise of Admiral Daryl Cottle. Before he was picked to lead the Navy, Caudill found ways to signal his support for Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's anti-diversity goals. The appointment reveals how ideological alignment has become a prerequisite for advancement in a Pentagon reshaped by the current administration's priorities. The admiral's trajectory illustrates the degree to which the military's upper echelons are being remade in real time. In business, a blockbuster media merger has hit a major snag. Lauren Hirsch, David McCabe, and Benjamin Mullen report that on a call around 9 p.m. on Thursday, Jeffrey Kessler, the top trial lawyer for Paramount, made a stunning proposal that could stall the company's $111 billion merger with Warner Bros. Discovery well into next year. Paramount, run by tech scion David Ellison, was staring down a lengthy legal battle with state attorneys general, who in mid-July had sued to stop the merger over antitrust concerns. Both sides seemed poised to spend weeks arguing about legal motions and scheduling questions that precede a trial. Then Kessler proposed a strategic move that could reshape the timeline and the calculus for two iconic media giants whose fate now hangs on an antitrust court battle with states. The war with Iran is also rewriting the economics of energy across Asia. Rivera Cara Davis, reporting from Manila and Batangas in the Philippines, with photographs by Jess Osnar, writes that developing Asian nations, scarred by Middle East supply shocks, are working to scale back their reliance on imported fuels, including liquefied natural gas. For the past 2 decades, major exporters and traders of LNG have pitched the fuel as a panacea for the world's energy-hungry emerging economies. Supercooled into liquid form for shipping, tens of billions of dollars of gas produced in the United States, Qatar, and Australia has flowed to Asia. But the war has upended those calculations. An offshore terminal was built in Batangas in 2023 to import LNG, but the country is now looking to source more gas domestically. The shift represents a fundamental rethinking of energy security in a region that has long been at the mercy of distant supply chains. And the president's push for nuclear energy, including a potential deal with Saudi Arabia, is drawing scrutiny over who stands to benefit. In some cases, no direct line can be drawn from the president's domestic nuclear agenda to his family or close allies. But they have overlapping business ties that could position them for gains. The intersection of policy and personal interest is a familiar dynamic in this administration, and the nuclear push is the latest arena where those lines blur. In technology, a phenomenon that many will recognize, the breakup loop. As social media companies face scrutiny over addictive design features, mental health experts cite a stream of breakup content on TikTok as an example of the failure to protect users. The algorithm, it seems, has learned that heartbreak drives engagement and it serves up an endless scroll of relationship endings, raw emotion, and the performative rituals of moving on. For users going through actual breakups, the feed becomes a hall of mirrors, reflecting their pain back at them in algorithmically optimized doses. It's a stark illustration of how platforms designed to maximize attention can exploit vulnerability. In New York, a transatlantic clash played out in public. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel on Sunday responded directly to Mayor Zoran Mamdani's calls for his arrest, accusing the mayor of fomenting hate and referring to a video address that Mamdani made last week as hate speech. Emma Goldberg reports that in an appearance on Fox News' Sunday Morning Futures, Netanyahu criticized the mayor for the video, released Tuesday, in which Mamdani called him a war criminal, condemned the war in Gaza, and urged the U.S. government to enforce an international criminal court warrant for the prime minister's arrest. "He's fomenting hate," Netanyahu said. The exchange underscores how a New York mayoral race has become a stage for international conflict, and how the city's politics are increasingly entangled with the war in Gaza. That same conflict, and the movement it has inspired, brought hundreds of Indians to Union Square in solidarity with the Cockroach Janta Party protests back home. Sarah Chatta reports on the diaspora's mobilization, a reminder that the generational uprising in India has resonated far beyond its borders, drawing in students, professionals, and families who see their own frustrations mirrored in a movement that began with a judge's insult and a joke party name. And in the Bronx, a 12-year-old boy named Jacob Freites was playing with his friend in the courtyard of their apartment building, swinging a baseball bat at an orange construction cone. Shelza Rose Marcius and Miles G. Cohen report that Jacob said they could do better than a cone, what they needed was a ball. He decided to bike 2 blocks to a bodega to buy one. His friend, 14-year-old Simon Garcia, was wary. "I said, be careful," Simon said on Sunday. His parents had warned him about walking to the bodega at the corner of Walton Avenue and Elliott Place in the Mount Eden neighborhood. Jacob never made it back. He was struck by a stray bullet from a gun fired during a brawl. He was the son of a retired detective sergeant. A child on a simple errand, gone in an instant, a story that encapsulates the brutal randomness of gun violence in American cities. On the arts front, Fabian Frankel, who has spent 3 seasons playing Sir Kristen Cole in HBO's House of the Dragon, spoke with Sean T. Collins about this week's episode, a pivotal moment in the Kingmaker's long and tortured journey. According to the actor, it was also a highlight. Frankel, 32, described a woman pulling up next to him in her car with her kids, rolling down the window, Kristen Cole. "I watched you last night." He's curious how that attention will change now that one of the most hated heels in Westeros is dead. The interview contains major spoilers for Season 3, Episode 6, but it's a rare glimpse into the experience of playing a character audiences love to hate and the strange intimacy of being recognized for a villain. In books, Alison Espach's novel The Wedding People comes out in paperback this week, 2 years and 500,000 hardcover sales later. It's a book she didn't want to write. Elizabeth Egan, reporting from Providence, Rhode Island, tells the story of how it arrived like an uninvited guest halfway through writing her second novel. Espach pictured a woman walking into a fancy hotel in Rhode Island where all the other guests were gathered for a wedding. She knew the woman was an interloper but couldn't figure out why she was there. Was she there to have an affair? To assassinate someone? Then it hit her, Phoebe was there to kill herself. As soon as I wrote that scene, I was thinking, oh no, now I have to write this book. The result is a dark comedy that has resonated with readers who find in its wreckage something unexpectedly funny and true. Also in books, the first serious biography of Albert Sabin recounts the pivotal role he played in the development of a polio vaccine. David Oshinsky, who directs the Division of Medical Humanities at NYU Grossman School of Medicine and won the Pulitzer for Polio, An American Story, reviews Karen Torgil's Albert Sabin, The Life of a Polio Vaccine Pioneer. 20 years ago, the National Museum of American History held an exhibition titled Whatever Happened to Polio? It focused on Jonas Salk, whose vaccine helped tame the disease. But Sabin's oral vaccine, easier to administer, cheaper to produce, became the primary tool for global eradication. The biography explores a scientist who was both essential and divisive, a man whose rivalry with Salk shaped the course of public health history. And Sarai Walker's Furious Violet is a psychological thriller about the kind of woman the genre and the world typically overlooks. Jumana Katib reviews a novel that begins with 2 words on an anonymous note left on a windshield, "Hello Mother." The recipient, Violet West Shelley, who goes by West, is a childless, motherless true crime writer. Those 2 words unleash a terror that preys on her rawest emotional wounds. As she races to figure out who is behind the message and tries to stay alive, the novel interrogates the genre's conventions and the women it usually pushes to the margins. In food, Melissa Clark offers her most adaptable 1-bowl cornmeal pound cake, 5 stars, hundreds of happy reader notes, and a recipe created to be as forgiving as possible. As long as you have cornmeal, a couple of eggs, and the usual pantry baking staples, you can whip it up in about an hour. It's the kind of Sunday baking project that asks little and gives much. And Nia Lanecooler shares 5 quick, easy dinners that turn into no reheating needed lunches. Her meal prep philosophy is basic multiplication: make a lot, double the recipe, eat it for lunch the next day or 2. The caveat: leftovers must be good whether eaten room temperature or cold, because she doesn't have a microwave, and even if she did, by the time lunch rolls around she's usually too hungry and impatient to wait. It's practical cooking for real life. In real estate, Rhonda Kaysen and Jonathan Stokes introduce us to Captain Gavin Bladen, who oversaw the construction of the luxury catamaran Hemisphere and has lived on it for 15 years. At €38.5 million, the prospective buyer would expect perfection, and Bladen was pretty sure that what he had to offer, a 5-cabin, 145-foot sailing yacht among the biggest in the world, met that standard. But when it changes hands, he may be cast adrift. The captain who built a life on the water faces the uncertainty that comes when the home you've tended for a decade and a half becomes someone else's asset. In fashion and style, Sophie Lou Jacobson's colorful, rippling glassware designs look great on Instagram. Lately, she's craving something else, a shift from the aesthetic that built her following towards something harder to capture in a square frame. And kids and adults are obsessed with squishies. Squeezable, malleable blob toys that come in a variety of forms. They're making them, trading them, hunting for them. It's a tactile craze in a digital world, a reminder that the simplest pleasures, something to squish between your fingers, can still spread like wildfire across playgrounds and social media alike. Also in style, a TikTok trend has users imagining moments in their life that might lead to sit-down dramatic interviews, the kind with orchestral music, a comfortable chair, a lapel microphone. Are you ready? A voice off camera asks. That toxic former workplace, that unsavory group chat, users are staging the documentaries of their lives, framing their grievances as cinematic testimony. It's confessional culture turned into content, a performance of vulnerability for an algorithm that rewards it. We note the passing of Paul Andrews, founder of what was called the Woodstock of UFOs. He died on June 30 at his home in Walnut Creek, California, at 77. Michael Rosenwald writes that Andrews, an entrepreneur of the unexplained, helped found Contact in the Desert in 2013 at the Joshua Tree Retreat Center, an annual convention where UFO believers could discuss extraterrestrial encounters, attend lectures on interstellar science, and don night vision goggles to search for alien vehicles in the starlit sky. A believer in the paranormal since childhood, when he recalled witnessing beings of light visiting his sister, Andrews created a safe space for a community often dismissed by the mainstream. His wife, Abigail Lewis, confirmed his death but did not provide a cause. And finally, the opinions section offers a constellation of essays. Clay Routledge, a research psychologist who directs Head Out, a mental health public education initiative, argues that Americans are more focused on mental health today than at any other point in history. Public health campaigns urge us to check in on our feelings, schools have adopted mental health curriculums, employers offer mental health days, thousands of wellness apps flood the market, yet our mental health appears to be getting worse. Over the past several decades, the percentage of Americans who report being in poor mental health has been rising. Over half of U.S. doctors surveyed in 2023 reported a decline in their patients' mental health. That same year, more than 3/4 of companies surveyed said mental health issues were affecting productivity. Routledge's provocation: we need to support psychological well-being without fixating on it. The obsession, he suggests, may be part of the problem. Alex Averbuch, a Ukrainian poet and assistant professor of Ukrainian literature and culture at the University of Michigan, writes about LGBTQ Ukrainian soldiers who can risk their lives for the state, but if they are wounded or killed, the partners who love them are legal strangers in the eyes of that state. The European Court of Human Rights found in 2023 that Ukraine's lack of legal recognition for same-sex couples was discriminatory and violated the right to private and family life. A bill to create registered partnerships was introduced that year but remains stuck in Parliament. The legal gap has always been unbearable, then the war with Russia seemed as though it would make that disparity untenable. Surely, queer soldiers visibly defending the nation would force the state to recognize their families. But the gap remains. David French writes that Christopher Nolan's Odyssey takes us somewhere we didn't know we were going, a film that rebukes the spirit of the age. B.D. McClay, a critic and essayist, argues that Nolan's Odysseus is a halfway hero. He wrestles with the problems he creates. That makes him a perfect figure for our modern moment. Some will say the problem is that it's about modern people, not ancient people. But everything made by modern people is about modern people. Some will say the problem is that Nolan uses an ancient text to revisit his own preoccupations, heroism, guilt, memory, the nature of time. But an artist who keeps gnawing at the same bone is worth watching. For McClay, the real problem is something else, something about what the film reveals about us. And Robin Given asks, are you a jerk or a sucker? Do only creeps or chumps still believe in the American dream? It's a question that cuts through the noise of the moment and lands, uncomfortably, in the space where we all have to decide what we still believe in. That's your briefing for Monday, July 27, 2026. We'll be back tomorrow with the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed.